Hey guys, tonight we're easing into the golden sands of Mali, where the sun rises like a gentle bronze drumbeat, and the air already hums with the soft bustle of morning markets. You trudge through the dusty village paths, the smell of millet, porridge curling through the breeze, and your sandals puff little clouds of dry earth with every step. The sky is wide, the day long, but the pace? Oh, it's deliciously slow. Historians still debate whether this everyday abundance of gold dulled its shine in Mali, or whether it deepened the kingdom's attachment to it. Some scholars suggest that Malians valued salt just as highly, its weight in trade sometimes equal to gold itself. Others argue that gold always held the deeper pull, quietly defining the kingdom's reach and reputation. You sit with Musa beneath the shade of a tamarind tree, watching the camel caravans roll out of the city, their bells chiming faintly as they disappear into the dust. You hear the griots sing of Mali's kings, how some built their power on the backs of traders, how others dreamed only of conquests. But Musa? Musa's dreams are still forming, still wrapped in the slow rhythm of daily life, still pressed between. The pages of maps he has yet to see dot the sun tips low now, stretching your shadow long and thin across the packed earth. You rise, brushing dust from your knees, and you know you'll follow him further into the slow, golden story that's just beginning to unfold. You walk with Musa as his world begins to shift, the steady pulse of the village giving way to the complex heartbeat of court politics. The palace halls seem busier now, the air thick with the quiet shuffle of scribes, the murmured advice of counselors, and the distant clang of traders unloading crates of salt and gold. It's no longer just a backdrop to his life. It's becoming the center of it. You follow him through the dusty corridors, where the smell of parchment mixes with the scent of roasted yams drifting in from the market. His footsteps grow more deliberate, his posture more practiced. Musa is beginning to understand that power doesn't simply arrive. It's built, patiently, like stacking pebbles, until they hold the weight of something far larger. Historians still argue whether Musa was formally named as the heir, or whether he simply emerged as the most competent figure when Mali needed a steady hand. Some say he was always next in line, waiting in the wings. Others believe his rise was more of a fortunate accident, a shuffle in the royal deck that placed him where destiny could find him. What's certain is that Musa's proximity to the throne tightens with each passing season. His uncle, the King Mansa Abubakari too, is known for his grand ambitions, especially his fascination with the sea. You hear the hushed rumors swirl that the king is planning something remarkable, something most of the court quietly doubts. The story comes together in whispers and fragments. Abubakari is said to be obsessed with what lies beyond the Atlantic, beyond the endless crash of waves where the sun sinks each night. He believes there are lands waiting there, riches undiscovered, stories unspoken. Some say he's spoken with sailors who claim the sea eventually ends. Others argue he's simply restless, itching for a glory that Mali's dusty markets can no longer provide. You walk beside Musa as the court debates his uncle's growing plans, whether to build a fleet, whether to send ships across the great, glittering unknown. Some advisors urge caution, their hands trembling as they gesture at the precious stores of timber and cloth needed for such an adventure. Others nod along eagerly, enchanted by the idea of a king who would conquer not deserts, but oceans. Historians still debate whether Abubakari's voyage was real or merely legend, whether his fleet ever set sail, or whether the story bloomed later, a myth to explain his disappearance. Some scholars insist he departed with hundreds of ships, vanishing into the sea's endless hush. Others believe the tale is a poetic exaggeration, a bedtime story gilded with the shimmer of the unattainable. What you see, though, is real enough. Musa standing quietly as the king appoints him as regent, placing the weight of Mali on his shoulders while he chases the edge of the world. You can feel the hesitation ripple through Musa. He wasn't supposed to be the king, not yet. Perhaps not ever. But Mali cannot stand empty. Someone must hold the reins while the sea pulls at Abubakari's dreams. And so, Musa accepts. You watch as the king's ships drift from the coast, their sails small as teeth against the horizon. Their hulls packed with men, with food, with stories they'll never tell. The fleet vanishes into legend. Musa is left behind, but he does not crumble under the weight of the crown. His hands steady on the pulse of the empire. He learns to read not just the ledgers of trade, but the subtler rhythms of loyalty and grain and silver. He governs as if the king will return, but he governs well. Time passes. The dust settles. The horizon remains empty. Historians still argue whether Musa's rule began in earnest out of necessity, or whether his regency was always meant to be a quiet rehearsal for full power. Some say he stepped into his role reluctantly. Others suggest he found his footing quickly. That power sits comfortably on him, like a worn robe. You walk with him now through Mali's gold mines, the earth cool and damp, the walls slick with history. Miners move carefully, their hands practiced, as they sift through the dark soil, coaxing out the shimmering dust that powers Mali's trade routes. Musa observes without fanfare. Gold is Mali's heartbeat, but Musa understands that it's the veins, the roads, the rivers, the markets that carry that pulse across kingdoms. He strengthens the trade routes, repairs the way stations, smooths the passage for camel caravans hauling gold, salt, ivory, and cloth across the Saharan spine. He knows that Mali must not simply survive. It must hum, it must shimmer, it must become so steady that even distant sultans will feel its weight. You trail behind him as he inspects the markets in Gao, in Timbuktu, where traders' voices mingle like wind chimes, where rare manuscripts from North Africa change hands, where spices from far-off ports perfume the dusty air. Musa walks quietly, but he listens to everything. He knows now that Mali's story is too big for its own borders. It needs to ripple outward. It needs to be told beyond its rivers and deserts. And Musa is thinking slowly, carefully about how to do just that. The sun slides lower as you stroll through Niani again. The street's familiar, but somehow sharper now. Musa's pace is steady, his hands clasped behind his back, the quiet weight of a crown not yet formalized, but already fully worn. The people nod to him. They know who holds the threads now. Musa's reign is beginning not with fanfare, not with grand declarations, but with the quiet, deliberate breath of a man who knows that steady hands build the strongest bridges. And so you follow him further, across sand, across stories, across the wide, golden map still waiting to be drawn. You walk with Musa as the quiet rhythm of leadership hardens into certainty. The regent who once waited for his uncle's sails to return now stands as Mansa Musa, not by accident, not by vacancy, but because Mali needs a king who is present, who is steady, who is here. There's no grand coronation, no parade with silk, banners fluttering in the breeze. His authority unfolds like dawn, slow but undeniable. The people shift from calling him regent to simply calling him Mansa the king. It slips into the daily greetings, into the rhythm of trade, into the soft prayers whispered at dusk. Historians still argue whether Musa seized the title formally or whether it simply settled on him like a robe that had been waiting for his shoulders. Some suggest there was a ceremonial acknowledgement. Others believe Mali's people, weary of absence, chose him with their feet, their hands, their trust. You can feel the shift in the streets of Niani. The market buzzes a little louder now. The caravans move with quicker certainty. The gold glimmers a little brighter, because the man who oversees it no longer does so on borrowed time. But Musa isn't content to simply maintain the empire. You trail behind him as he tightens the gears, oils the trade routes, threads Mali's edges into a stronger weave. His fingers trace the worn maps in the palace, but his mind sketches something far bigger. He isn't just thinking about cities. He's thinking about the spaces between them, about the silence between ports, about where Mali's gold can reach that it hasn't yet touched. Musa strengthens the network of caravanserais, those quiet, life-saving way stations across the Saharan spine where camels rest, traders sleep, and water is worth more than gold. You walk with him past camels huffing softly in the cool of the stations, their loads heavy with salt and ivory, their feet crusted with the memories of 1,000 leagues. The caravan masters greet Musa with a kind of respectful nod reserved for someone who understands that these dusty outposts are the threads holding the empire's tapestry together. Musa knows this well. He pours resources into maintaining them, making the vast Sahara less deadly. A little more predictable. You travel with Musa to Timbuktu, a city beginning to hum with more than just trade. It's a place where scholars gather, where merchants haggle, where ideas spark across languages. The scent of ink and parchment drifts on the breeze, mingling with the salt and spices of the market stalls. Timbuktu isn't just a stop on the map, it's becoming a cradle of knowledge, a quiet gravity while pulling in manuscripts, mathematicians, poets. Musa lingers here, watching the scholars argue over the margins of dusty texts, watching the scribes copy manuscripts with the careful patience of someone threading silk. Historians still debate whether Musa actively planned to transform Timbuktu into a center of learning or whether it simply happened under his wide-reaching administration. Some suggest his investments were intentional, part of his long game to place Mali on the intellectual map. Others think Timbuktu's rise was a happy accident of geography and trade. You watch him fund mosques, invest in scholars, ensure that the pathways of gold and salt also carry ideas and stories. And Musa's mind is already wandering further. He isn't satisfied with Mali simply being wealthy. He wants the world to know. He wants the weight of Mali's gold to echo across continents. You follow him back to Niani as the quiet plan takes shape. Musa is preparing for something colossal, something that will ripple through the centuries like a soft drumbeat in a quiet hall. He is planning a pilgrimage. Not just a personal journey, not just a spiritual duty, but a procession so grand, so golden, that it will etch Mali's name into the edges of the known world. You walk with him as he speaks to his advisors, as he weighs the cost of such an expedition, hundreds of people, camels, supplies, the strain on the empire's coffers. But Musa isn't flinching. He knows that some things are worth their weight in gold, and some things are worth much, much more. Historians still argue whether Musa's pilgrimage was planned, primarily as a spiritual journey or a calculated display of Mali's opulence. Some scholars suggest it was a mixture of both, a sincere religious act wrapped in deliberate political theater. Others insist the pilgrimage was less about faith and more about forging Mali's reputation on the world stage. You pass through the bustling streets where traders swap stories of the king's growing caravan, where artisans craft the intricate saddles, where gold is measured, weighed, and wrapped in preparation, that the city hums with anticipation. Musa moves among his people with a steady grace, as if the weight of such grandeur is something he's already rehearsed in his bones. You can feel the caravan's shadow growing behind him, camels laden with gold, attendants in linen, scholars carrying manuscripts, servants bearing silks and spices. And at the front of it all will be Musa, not just as a man fulfilling his duty to Mecca, but as a king announcing Mali to the world. You stand beside him as he surveys the final preparations, his gaze soft but focused, his fingers resting lightly on the saddle's edge. The journey is about to begin, and you can already hear the faint whisper of history leaning in to listen. You step into the soft glow of dawn as the great caravan finally pulls away from Niani. the air still cool, and the ground already stirring with the shuffling feet of camels and the soft clink of harnesses. The dust rises gently, caught in the morning light, as if the road itself is exhaling in preparation. Mansa Musa's pilgrimage has begun. You walk alongside him, the packed earth thudding quietly beneath your sandals as the procession stretches. So far ahead and behind you that it feels like a moving city. Hundreds, some say thousands of people travel with you. Soldiers, scholars, servants, musicians, cooks, merchants, and those simply drawn by curiosity. And the camels. Oh, the camels. Historians still argue whether Musa's caravan included 60 camels or several hundred. But what they agree on is this. Each camel carried hundreds of pounds of pure gold, ingots, dust, trinkets, gold tied in soft leather pouches, gold woven into saddle decorations, gold that would jingle and gleam as the sun rose higher. It isn't just gold, though. You pass bundles of salt, amphorae of water, crates of carefully packed manuscripts, and fragrant sacks of kola nuts. The scent of these mingles with the camel sweat and the sweet sour aroma of dates tucked away for the long road. The first days are filled with quiet, with the steady rhythm of feet and hooves, with the rustling of linen as Musa's attendants adjust the awnings shielding him from the desert glare. You stop in towns where the people line the roads to watch the glittering caravan pass. Some bow, some simply gape. Others race alongside for a time, caught in the wonder of it. And the gifts. Musa gives freely. Gold coins, fine cloth, small tokens to the local rulers along the way. He gives like a man who knows the more he scatters, the richer his story will become. Historians still debate whether Musa's generosity was carefully calculated to open doors along his route, or whether it was simply the open-handed nature of a man so wealthy that gold felt like river pebbles. To him, some argue his gifts were diplomatic strategy. Others think he simply delighted in watching eyes widen at the weight of his offerings. You share the cool of evening fires with the caravan guards who joke about how the camels, weighed down with gold, walk with the lazy swagger of nobles. You watch the servants carefully tend to Musa's tents, their edges pinned precisely against the desert winds. You sleep under the heavy quilt of stars as the Sahara sighs around you, and the quiet hum of the caravan settling into rest lulls you into a slow, easy breathing. The days are long, but the rhythm is steady. And slowly, you realize you've become a part of this procession's pulse, the way the morning's first sounds rise like a soft drum, the way the sand crunches beneath careful feet, the way Musa moves with the calm confidence of a man whose story has already outpaced him. You follow him into Cairo, a city buzzing with the thick scent of incense and the constant murmur of trade. Cairo does not expect what arrives. The caravan pours into the streets, and the city tilts slightly under the sudden weight of Male's gold. Musa's generosity does not slow here. It accelerates. He donates to the poor. He lavishes gold upon the mosques. He gifts the city's officials and religious leaders with gold so freely that Cairo's economy trembles under the flood. Historians still argue whether the famed inflation that struck Cairo after Musa's visit was a brief ripple or a decade-long echo. Some claim the value of gold plummeted in the region for years. Others suggest the story of the economic disruption is overblown, a tall tale woven by traders eager to inflate their own stories. You trail behind Musa as he moved through the grand markets of Cairo, his steps slow, his eyes absorbing the architecture, the smells, the sounds. He speaks with scholars, with merchants, with imams, his voice calm, his gifts always heavy. The city is dazzled, and word begins to ripple far beyond Cairo's crowded stalls. Traders carry the story upriver, across seas, into Europe. Cartographers hear whispers of a king from the south, a ruler so rich that gold flows from his hands like water dot in dusty corners of far-off workshops. Maps begin to sketch Musa's name across Mali, sometimes with a tiny drawing of a king holding a golden scepter. The stories outpace the facts, but no one seems to mind. Historians still debate whether these European depictions of Musa were based on actual accounts or inflated by hearsay, carried along the Silk routes and Mediterranean docks. Some believe the maps captured a real sense of his grandeur. Others think they were simply dazzled guesses, a giant king for a land no one really understood. But in Cairo, you feel the soft undertow of Musa's fame spreading like ripples in a pond. You linger with him in the city's quiet mosques, where he prays with the same steady reverence he showed back home. There's a hush around him here that isn't about gold, it's about the man who carries it. When Musa finally departs Cairo, the city exhales. Some relieved, some wistful, all a little changed. You join the long, slow caravan as it turns toward Mecca. The roads grow quieter, the desert pressing closer again, and you walk beside Musa as he prepares to complete his pilgrimage not just as a king, but as a pilgrim, a man fulfilling his sacred duty. The camels still jingle, the linen still rustles, the gold is still heavy, but here the pace softens. The road stretches on, and the story of Musa's pilgrimage continues to carve its path through the soft sands of memory. The road to Mecca draws you further east, the caravan sliding along the familiar rhythm of hoofbeats, sandal scrapes, and the quiet creak of pack saddles. You walk with Mansa Musa through landscapes that roll like gentle waves of sand, where the sun scrawls long shadows across the dunes, and the wind tugs softly at your robe. The journey is not rushed. It cannot be rushed. The caravan's sheer size dictates a careful, deliberate pace. You've begun to recognize the sound of the camel's footsteps as more than just noise. It's the heartbeat of this procession. Steady and calm, you pass through oases where date palms lean lazily over still pools of water. Merchants greet Musa with practiced bows, and small children stare wide-eyed at the wealth trailing behind him. The caravan replenishes supplies dates, grains, water, but gold remains the most memorable cargo. Musa gives it away as freely. Here, as he did in Cairo, you pause one evening near a low, sandy ridge where Musa sits beneath a woven canopy, consulting with scholars who have joined the pilgrimage. They speak of the world beyond, of distant cities like Baghdad and Damascus. Musa listens carefully, his fingers lightly tapping the polished wood of his staff. Historians still argue whether Musa's journey to Mecca was purely driven by religious devotion, or whether he understood, even then, that this pilgrimage would shape Mali's place in the wider world. Some say he sought spiritual fulfillment. Others suggest he also sought to place Mali firmly on the intellectual and trade maps of the era. You sleep that night beneath stars that seem to pulse with ancient stories. The soft hiss of sand shifting beneath the wind becomes a kind of lullaby. When you reach Mecca, the caravan slows. You step into the sacred city's embrace alongside Musa, the scent of incense and the low murmur of prayers wrapping around you like a familiar cloth. The rituals unfold with slow, precise grace. You walk the tawaf, circling the Kaaba, the cool stone under your fingertips, the rhythm of ancient footsteps guiding your pace. Musa walks alongside ChatGPT, said you, his expression calm, thoughtful, carrying the quiet weight of both his personal faith and the distant echoes of his sprawling empire. You can almost hear the distant markets of Mali still humming behind him, as though the empire itself has followed him here, woven invisibly into the folds of his robe. There's a simplicity to the rituals that feels grounding. No golden thrones. Here, no courtiers bowing, no grand audiences, just the smooth stone beneath your hands, the quiet rhythm of prayer, the soft shuffle of feet. Musa kneels, his forehead brushing the earth. A man among men, equal in this shared devotion. The city breathes around you, its streets curling through fragrant markets, its alleys layered with stories whispered over countless evenings. You wander through the crowded lanes, your senses steeped in the mingling scents of spices and smoke, a flicker of lamps casting gentle halos on worn stone walls. Historians still discuss whether Musa's arrival in Mecca was met with immediate recognition, or if his immense reputation followed more quietly, carried like desert wind, reaching ears one caravan at a time. Some scholars suggest his wealth and generosity turned heads long before he reached the city. Others propose that here, amid so many pilgrims, he was just one more traveler among the multitudes. But you can feel it, the quiet ripple that follows him, the subtle shift in how merchants bow, in how scholars approach, in the way eyes linger just a little longer as he passes. His presence carries weight, not just of gold, but of a story that has walked far. You spend your days in Mecca beside him, moving between prayer, study, and the slow, meandering rhythm of the markets. Musa meets scholars from distant lands, exchanging ideas, commissioning manuscripts, weaving Mali's story into the grander fabric of the Islamic world. You find yourself lingering at a quiet stall where a scribe carefully inks a passage onto parchment. The scribe speaks of Timbuktu not in passing, but with genuine curiosity, as though the city's name has already begun to circle through these distant streets. Musa's pilgrimage is not just a journey of steps, but of stories, of quiet seeds planted in the minds of those who will carry them back across continents. One evening, as the sun dips low, you sit with Musa beneath a simple canopy. The sky blushes with fading gold as he speaks softly not of palaces or riches, but of the sweetness of dates, of the patient hum of riverboats, of the books he longs to bring home. You sip spiced water and realize this is not just a man who gives gold. This is a man who carries a map of stories in his heart. You think back to the markets of Cairo, to the startled merchants and the rippling consequences of Musa's generosity. You wonder whether he ever second-guessed the weight of the gold he scattered, whether he measured his impact in coins or conversations. Historians still argue whether his pilgrimage ultimately benefited or strained the economies he touched. Some say he disrupted markets for years. Others argue that the trade routes and intellectual exchanges he kindled far outweighed any temporary imbalance that you spend quiet hours in the libraries of Mecca, your fingers tracing the careful strokes of ink across parchment. The scholars you meet speak of distant lands, of mathematics, of astronomy, and you sense Musa's hunger for knowledge, not just for himself, but for Mali. His pilgrimage gathers more than spiritual fulfillment. It gathers ideas, people, possibilities. When the time comes to return home, the caravan assembles slowly, the rhythm of preparation familiar now. The scent of oiled leather, the clink of harness buckles, the low grumble of camels, all of it feels like the soft drumbeat of homeward steps. You leave Mecca with bags no heavier than when you arrived, but with a head crowded by stories, by quiet conversations beneath woven canopies, by the weight of a journey that will ripple across maps and generations. The road unwinds before you, and the long walk continues. Musa walks alongside you, steady and measured, his gaze lowered in reverence as the Kaaba rises before you, dark and ancient, wrapped in its black cloth embroidered with gold. The courtyard thrums with the quiet prayers of countless pilgrims, their movements like waves rippling gently around the sacred cube. You trace your fingertips over the worn stones, feeling the centuries pressed into their surface, the coolness of the rock beneath the blazing sun. Musa's procession has woven itself seamlessly into this great assembly, the grandeur of his caravan gently receding into the background as devotion takes center stage. You follow him through the rites, the slow pacing, the measured sips of water, the prayers spoken softly in the early morning air. Musa is not just a ruler here. He is a pilgrim among pilgrims, his wealth set aside in the sacred space, though his reputation still flickers like a distant lantern. Historians still argue whether Musa's extraordinary display of wealth during his Hajj overshadowed his religious sincerity, or whether it was simply a reflection of his gratitude and reverence. Some believe the gold he distributed was meant to elevate Mali's name. Others think it was an act of personal generosity, uncalculated and pure. You find quiet places in Mecca-shaded courtyards, the cool embrace of the mosque's stone walls, where time seems to fold gently around you. Musa lingers in conversation with scholars. His curiosity is insatiable as his generosity. He listens to poets, theologians, architects. He gathers not just stories, but blueprints, names, fragments of knowledge he will one day carry home. One scholar gifts him a small, leather-bound volume, the edges worn, the script looping and patient. Musa accepts it as though he's been handed a precious gem. You imagine the book finding a quiet place in his chambers, its pages softened by the touch of his hands over the years. The pilgrimage winds slowly toward its end. You feel the sand beneath your sandals as the caravan prepares to turn west again. Musa's gaze lingers on the distant minarets, as if he's tucking them carefully into his memory. The road home waits. You begin the long journey home, retracing your steps across the deserts, the same golden sands, the same steady camels, but now the caravan feels different. The pace is slower, the mood softer, as though the weight of what Musa has seen settles over everyone. Pilgrimage changes people, and you can sense it in the way Musa carries himself now, quieter, more reflective, though his presence still draws attention like sunlight on polished gold. The caravan is not as heavily laden with gold as it was on the way out. Musa's generosity in Cairo and Mecca has left a noticeable dent in the royal coffers. Historians still argue whether the economic ripple he left in Cairo was intentional. Diplomacy, accidental extravagance, or simply the natural result of traveling with literal mountains of gold. Some claim that the gold inflation he triggered lasted over a decade, reshaping the region's markets. You pass through smaller towns now, and the stories of Musa have traveled faster than the caravan itself. Children peer out from doorways, whispering, pointing at the man whose gold became legend. Traders greet you with knowing smiles, their prices mysteriously higher than they should be, as if the shine of Musa's gold is expected to spill into their hands too. One town you visit has prepared a celebration in Musa's honor. There are baskets of dates, platters of roasted lamb, and dancers with jingling anklets who twirl in the dusty squares. Musa offers gifts to the town's leaders: ornate fabrics, polished stones, a few remaining nuggets of gold, but he also offers something else: stories. He tells them of Mecca's markets, of scholars from faraway lands, of architecture that touches the sky. Musa has gathered more than silk and spices. He has gathered ideas. Along the road, Musa begins assembling a traveling circle of scholars, architects, and poets. He offers them a place in his court, in his city, promising them support, resources, and an audience eager to learn. Some agree immediately, charmed by his vision. Others hesitate, their homes too deeply rooted to leave behind. But Musa is patient. His caravan becomes not just a train of camels and goods, but a rolling university, a slow-moving tapestry of conversations about astronomy, poetry, theology, and architecture. You catch snippets of their discussions as you walk theories about the stars, stories of kings long forgotten, questions about the shape of the world. One scholar insists the earth is perfectly spherical, while another waves him off, claiming it's more like an uneven melon. Musa listens to both, his laughter soft but genuine. You pass through oases where the date palms lean just so, their reflections trembling in the blue water. Musa pauses to pray, his robes catching the faintest breeze, the silence settling around him like a patient friend. He is thinking not just of their return, but of what comes next, what Mali could become. Historians still debate whether Musa's journey was a turning point for Mali's political identity, or simply an extraordinary footnote in its long history. Some say it marked Mali's golden age. Others argue that the kingdom's power would have peaked. Regardless, you feel the edges of the empire tugging at the caravan as you draw closer to familiar lands. The red earth changes under your feet. The air grows heavier. The scent of river reeds returns. People greet you with wide eyes, stories tumbling over each other as they try to recount the tales they've already heard about the journey. And through it all, Musa walks steadily, the weight of the gold lighter now, but the weight of what he's bringing home immeasurable. You step back into the heart of Mali, the city of Niani, rising before you like a familiar friend. The red earth, the mud brick. Walls, the scent of cooking millet, all of it wraps around you like a well-worn robe. Musa's return is not a quiet one. The city has been waiting, buzzing with tales of his legendary pilgrimage. The streets alive with children, chasing after the caravan and traders, leaning in to catch a glimpse of the man who made Cairo's gold lose its luster. There's music in the air, the thump of drums, the high trill of flutes, and voices raised in welcome songs. Musa waves, but he seems distant now, thoughtful. You can almost hear the gears turning behind his measured pace, already dreaming of what comes next. He's returned not just with stories and scholars, but with blueprints, plans for a city, for schools, for mosques that scrape the sky. Historians still argue whether Musa's architectural ambitions were sparked during his journey, or whether the seeds were planted long before he set out. Some suggest he was simply waiting for the right moment, the right inspiration. Others believe it was the grandeur of Cairo and Mecca that shifted his vision. Soon, you find yourself in the company of the architect brought from Cairo al-Sahili, a man with careful hands and a quiet smile. He and Musa walk the streets of Niani together, pointing, pausing, debating where new mosques might rise, where markets could expand, where schools could be tucked into the city's curves. The people watch with a mix of curiosity and excitement. Change is coming, not in the loud, crushing way of armies, but in the slow, deliberate stacking of mud bricks and the patient carving of wooden beams. There's something soothing about the rhythm of construction, the scraping of clay, the steady pad of hands pressing walls into place. The first great mosque Musa commissions is not just a place of prayer, it's a declaration, a structure that pulls the sky downward to meet the people. The walls are thick, the towers rise with surprising elegance, and the doors swing open to scholars and villagers alike. Musa's vision is not only grand, but deeply personal. He builds not to impress foreign lands, but to shape his own, to weave knowledge into the very streets people walk. You spend your days moving between the growing libraries, where scrolls pile higher by the week. The scholars Musa, invited from distant lands, now settle into the city, teaching, debating, and transcribing works in languages that dance across the page in looping curls. One scholar spends hours explaining the movement of the stars to a crowd of wide-eyed children. Another carefully maps trade routes that stretch like lazy vines across the desert. Musa doesn't just watch. He walks among them, sits cross-legged during lectures, asks questions that make even the most confident scribes pause. He is not a distant king. He is a participant, a student, a man who believes the world can fit inside a scroll, if only you look closely enough. Historians still debate whether Musa's patronage of learning was a true passion or a clever strategy to strengthen his rule. Some believe he genuinely craved knowledge. Others think he saw education as a powerful tool to unite and expand his empire. Perhaps, as with many things, it was both. The markets of Niani grow livelier. New traders arrive, their goods shimmering in the sunlight: salt, copper, silks, and rare books wrapped in linen. You walk among them, the air thick with the smell of roasted peanuts and honey cakes, the chatter of buyers and sellers rolling like a soft river through the streets. The gold has not run out, though Musa spends it with the same thoughtful generosity he displayed on his journey. He funds teachers, commissions calligraphers, supports caravan routes that stretch toward distant cities you've only heard about in half-finished stories. Some of the elders murmur that maybe Musa is too generous, that maybe he spends more on stone and scrolls than on soldiers. Historians still argue whether his focus on scholarship left parts of the empire vulnerable, or whether it was precisely this quiet investment that kept Mali's heart beating long after his reign. But here, now, in the dusty warmth of Niani, the city hums with new life. Musa walks its streets, nodding to basket weavers, greeting fishermen, pausing to watch children chase each other through the long afternoon shadows. He carries no gold in his hands as he walks, but he carries something else, a vision, a steady belief that knowledge, like gold, is worth the wait. You follow Musa as he drifts through the slow rhythm of ruling, the days folding into one another like warm pages in a well-read book. The empire hums around him, traders shuffle their wares. Through dusty streets, scribes bend over scrolls until their backs ache, and builders slap fresh mud onto rising walls. There's a pleasant predictability to it all. But even in this gentle pace, Musa doesn't idle. You watch him balance the delicate work of resolving disputes over cattle and land, adjusting tax levies, negotiating with foreign merchants, who bow deeply but always seem to ask for more. His court is a quiet kind of busy, not the blaring trumpets and crashing gongs you might expect from the richest man in the world. Just soft conversations, careful record-keeping, and the occasional clink of coins being counted in shadowed corners. Historians still argue whether Musa's wealth was truly unmatched globally, or whether later storytellers simply spun his riches into legend. Some scholars believe the numbers are exaggerated, woven with the same kind of golden thread that embroidered the tales of El Dorado. Others point to the records from Cairo and Mecca, which suggest Musa's gold flood was no mere rumor. You wander through the palace grounds, where the air smells faintly of millet porridge and damp earth. Musa's guards, dressed in bright woven, cloth with spears that gleam in the morning light, nod as you pass. They watch, but rarely intervene. Life here isn't about grand battles or constant rebellion. It's about trade, about balance, about ensuring the caravans flow like steady rivers across the Sahara. One day, you find Musa sitting beneath a tamarind tree, his fingers tracing slow circles in the dirt as he speaks with an elderly storyteller. The man's voice is soft, his words meandering, but Musa listens closely. He's always been fond of stories, not just those found in dusty scrolls, but the ones that live in people's memories, that linger in the pauses between words. You settle. Nearby, half listening to the story of a river that changed its course to protect a village, a tale that probably isn't written anywhere, but feels just as true as the gold weighed in the market stalls. Musa isn't a king who builds statues of himself. There are no towering likenesses of his face grinning down from archways. Instead, his legacy seems to settle into the soft spaces of daily life, the schools where children scratch letters into clay tablets, the quiet mosques where traders whisper prayers before setting out across the desert, the libraries that grow heavier with scrolls written in languages from lands so far you'd need 100 camels and 1,000 waterskins to reach them. Historians still debate whether Musa's decision to avoid monumental self-images was intentional humility or simply a cultural preference for leaving certain things unwritten, uncarved. Some suggest he preferred the kind of remembrance that slipped quietly into the habits of a city rather than the bold permanence of stone. The seasons turn gently in Mali. Rain comes and goes, drumming on rooftops, feeding the green that creeps between buildings. You watch Musa's court move with the cycle's harvest festivals, thick with sweet fritters, trade fairs that knot the streets with bright cloth and foreign spices, quiet afternoons where the scribes' scratching pens seem louder than the markets. Bells dot sometimes. In the evenings you find Musa in the courtyards, listening to musicians plucking slow, wandering notes from wooden harps. He doesn't speak much during these moments. He just leans back, letting the music stitch itself around the cool air. One soft joke drifts through the court that Musa's greatest achievement wasn't the gold or the schools, but his ability to sit perfectly still while balancing the weight of an entire empire on his shoulders. Some say he never looked burdened, that he wore responsibility like a loose, comfortable cloak. But even Musa has quiet worries. You catch glimpses of them in the long pauses when he studies the traders' ledgers. In the extra question he asks the guards about the safety of the salt caravans. In the subtle way he walks the city before. Major decisions, as if the dust under his feet could tell him which way to lean. Historians still discuss whether his later years were marked by more caution or more generosity. Some suggest he grew meticulous, carefully counting what he spent and what he gave. Others argue he continued to scatter gold like seeds, trusting that wealth would grow in the hands of his people. You think it's probably both. That's how most people are, a tangle of careful planning and impulsive generosity, a mixture of order and the occasional joyful gamble dot as you wander the streets. You see his legacy pressing into the corners of the empire, not with grand declarations, but in the quiet things. A schoolmaster reciting poetry to yawning children. A merchant teaching his son to weigh salt against gold dust. A librarian dusting the edges of a precious manuscript. And through it all, Musa's presence lingers like a familiar rhythm, steady and soothing. His empire breathes in gold and breathes out knowledge. His people move to the pulse of trade, the sway of learning, the comfort of a city that grows not through conquest, but through the patient, deliberate stacking of dreams. You follow Musa through the quieter chapters now, the ones where the pace slows to the kind of rhythm that would probably put most impatient kings to sleep. But you settle right into it, the comfortable weight of slow days pressing like a warm blanket over the empire. The streets of Mali hum with familiar patterns, market traders calling out prices, children racing through alleys, the soft sweep of brooms brushing dust from smooth stone floors. Even the palace guards seem more relaxed now, leaning against doorways, their spears balanced idly across their shoulders. Musa's court drifts toward a steady focus on learning. You find yourself walking the shaded corridors of the university. He helped build, the air cool and thick with the scent of old scrolls and fresh ink. Here, scholars debate over the precise wording of legal texts and trace delicate maps of distant lands. They argue about astronomy, mathematics, theology, sometimes with furrowed brows, sometimes with the easy laughter of people who know they'll never quite solve everything. Historians still argue whether Musa's libraries rivaled those of more famous medieval cities like Baghdad or Cordoba. Some say Mali's intellectual circles were the quiet equals of the grand Islamic centers, trading ideas just as steadily as gold. Others caution that while Musa built the structures, it's unclear how many rare manuscripts actually found there. Way into his collection, you wander past scribes hunched over low tables, their fingers stained with ink, their heads nodding gently as they copy line after careful line. One pauses to stretch, the crack of his back echoing softly in the high-ceilinged room, and you realize that even in a palace gilded by gold, it's the quiet work of writing that seems to hold the most weight. Musa spends more time with scholars, now inviting them to his court, listening as they gently weave stories and legal opinions into the long, lazy afternoons. His curiosity hasn't faded, though his steps are slower. He leans more heavily on his walking staff these days, the smooth wood polished by years of his grip. You remember that staff, it's not grand, not wrapped in gold leaf or studded with gems. Just a solid piece of carved wood, comfortable in his hand, dependable in the way that soft sandals and well-worn mats are dependable. There's a sense that Musa has grown more reflective now. He still governs, still meets with merchants, still oversees the careful balance of taxes and trade, routes. But he moves through his city with the gaze of someone counting, not coins, but seasons. You find him one morning, sitting in a quiet courtyard, the sunlight dappled through fig leaves, his gaze fixed on nothing in particular. When an attendant asks about a minor dispute over grazing lands, Musa answers softly, almost absent-mindedly, as though the weight of small conflicts has grown familiar enough to resolve themselves. Some scholars believe this was a time when Musa withdrew somewhat from the daily busyness of court life, letting trusted advisors handle the finer details. Others argue that he remained sharply attentive to the pulse of the empire, just more subtle in his methods. You walk the city's outer edges, where new walls rise and markets bloom along the caravan paths. Traders speak of Musa's name with quiet respect, not the loud praise you hear in songs, but the kind that lingers in the spaces between negotiations, the way a merchant's eyes soften when recalling a fair tax, or a camel driver recounts the well-kept wells along the desert route. It's a kind of legacy that doesn't need fanfare. It settles into the bones of the city, into the packed earth of the roads, into the quiet assurance that this is a place where trade flows, where learning grows, where gold glimmers but doesn't blind. You pause by the Niger River, its slow currents gliding past fishing boats and woven baskets drifting lazily along the surface. The river's pulse matches the empire's steady, vast, and entirely unhurried. There's a small gathering near the water where children listen to an old fisherman tell stories of faraway places. He describes ships larger than markets, cities where it rains gold, lands where the sun never quite sets. The children gasp, wide-eyed, caught in the net of his words. You wonder whether Musa, in his younger days, would have sat among them hungry for stories that stretched beyond his horizon. Historians still debate whether Musa truly intended to expand his empire much further, or whether he was content to cultivate what he already held. Some believe his later years were marked by quiet consolidation rather than ambitious conquest. Others suggest that his support of scholars and merchants was a subtler form of expansion, a soft kind of empire built on influence, not force. You watch Musa share a meal with his family, a simple spread of millet bread, roasted fish, and sweet tamarind. He laughs more now, his deep chuckle echoing softly through the open courtyard. His children lean close, asking questions about the cities he visited, the deserts he crossed. Musa answers with the patience of someone who knows that stories, like gold, are best when given freely. There's a kind of comfort in these slow days. The rhythm of the palace, the quiet labor of scribes, the steady trade caravans drifting in like clockwork, all of it weaves together into something warm, something enduring. You pass the market again, where the air hums with the low murmur of bargaining, the clink of scales, the sharp sweetness of ripe dates filling the baskets. Merchants nod to you, and you realize they're still using weights and measures introduced during Musa's reign. A practical legacy, quietly etched into the daily rhythm of life. And through it all, Musa walks slowly through his city, steady as the sun, quietly tending to the threads of his empire like a weaver at his loom, never rushed, always deliberate. Follow Musa as he leans more into the quiet weight of age, the kind that wraps around his shoulders like a heavy but familiar cloak. His steps are measured now, his gaze lingering longer on the walls of the palace, on the curve of the river, on the slow sway of the city's tall grasses as the breeze glides through. The gold still flows, of course, The caravans still arrive, their camels padded and patient, their cargoes balanced with careful skill. The markets still buzz with the low hum of bargaining. But Musa, you can tell, is less enchanted by the glitter now. The sparkle of gold has softened into something more practical, like the reliable edge of a well-used knife. Historians still debate whether Musa's later years were marked by purposeful slowing or by a kind of gentle surrender to the natural pace of life. Some suggest he chose to step back, content to watch his empire run on the systems he'd carefully built. Others think perhaps time simply encouraged him to let go, as age has a habit of doing. You watch him spend more time near the Niger, seated on a woven mat, a simple staff resting across his lap. It's a quiet perch, shaded by trees, where fishermen wave lazily in passing, and the scent of river reeds mingles with the sharp tang of clay pots left to dry in the sun. One morning, you find Musa gently instructing a group of young boys, his own grandsons among them, on the art of sand mapping, a simple, almost playful exercise where the positions of caravans, cities, and rivers are traced in the sand with fingers and small twigs. It's the kind of lesson that looks like a game, but carries the weight of geography, trade, and survival. He draws careful lines, nudging a twig here, a pebble there, as the boys chatter and argue over where the camels should go. He smiles, correcting, gently reminding them that sand shifts, but roots endure. The scholars still visit him, bringing curious questions wrapped in scrolls. Sometimes it's a query about inheritance laws, sometimes a puzzle about distant lands, and sometimes just a beautifully copied verse from the Koran that Musa traces slowly with his finger, as if the ink still held the warmth of the scribe's hand. There are debates, of course. Historians still argue whether Musa's influence over his empire's legal structures was as hands-on as his architectural projects. Some claim he remained closely involved in governance until his final days. Others suggest he gradually passed those duties to trusted advisors, preferring to drift through the quiet corridors of thought rather than the noisy courts of daily disputes. You walk with him as he revisits the mosque he built in Timbuktu, pausing to run his hand over the cool mud brick walls. The city has grown, not just in size, but in spirit. Timbuktu has become a name that stretches far beyond Malay now, its reputation. As a seat of learning humming through trade routes and travelers' tales alike, Musa listens to the call to prayer with a stillness that feels deeper than habit, deeper than duty. It's the kind of stillness that settles into the bones, that says, I have seen enough, and yet I am still looking. In the palace, the rhythm of life continues. The kitchen clatters with the preparation of slow-cooked stews, honey cakes, and roasted millet. The guards swap lazy jokes as they polish brass fittings. Children still sneak into the quieter rooms, playing hide-and-seek among the folded linens and carved chests. You pass a scribe who's carefully copying a legal code onto fresh papyrus. His brow is furrowed, not from strain, but from that careful concentration of someone who knows that words, like sand ruts, can shift if you don't weigh them properly. Musa's sons gather more often now, seated cross-legged, heads bent in. Quiet conversation about succession, trade, the delicate handling of disputes between distant towns. There's no clear rush, but there's an understanding that the future is steadily stepping toward them. You find Musa later, seated in his favorite courtyard, a bowl of sweet tamarind resting near his elbow, a faint smile playing at the edge of his mouth. He's listening to a traveling old merchant who speaks of faraway coastlines where boats are carved in shapes Musa has never seen. The traveler's words drift like soft music in the warm air, and Musa nods, absorbing the story as though tucking it carefully into a chest of memories. Historians still debate whether Musa's influence on the broader Islamic world continued to ripple after his Hajj, or whether his empire quietly folded into its own rhythms once he withdrew from the whole. Grand stage. Some point to trade records that hint at Mali's continued prosperity, while others suggest the golden glow dimmed slightly as newer powers rose elsewhere. But here, now, as you sit beside him, the empire feels steady, not flashy, not booming with fresh conquests. Just steady, like the slow lap of the river against the reeds, like the worn path of camel caravans through the sand. You pass through the market again, where merchants still weigh their goods using measures Musa had carefully standardized years before. The sellers don't think about it much now. They measure by habit, by feel, trusting the scales the way you trust a well-worn pair of sandals. You catch sight of a young boy helping his mother stack woven baskets. He's balancing a coin on his thumb, spinning it lazily. That coin bears Musa's seal, though the boy probably doesn't know the hand that approved its design. It's a small legacy, but somehow it feels just right. You walk the city's edge. As the sun settles into that warm, honey-colored haze that softens every edge, the air hums with the scent of roasted nuts, fresh fish, and dust settling after a long day. Musa's walk is slower now, but he still walks, leaning on his polished staff, his gaze steady, his steps deliberate. The city hums around him. The empire breathes, and Musa moves quietly through it, the builder of gold roads, the weaver of steady paths. You walk alongside Musa as his steps grow fewer, his days growing quieter, but no less thoughtful. The palace grounds now seem more like a familiar garden than a center of power. The walls are warm under his palm, the pathways smoothed by years of careful walking. The steady scrape of sandals against stone is almost a lullaby now. The empire hums on, its traders winding their routes, its scribes carefully curling letters onto parchment. Musa watches it all from his favorite shaded bench, where the breeze nudges the leaves just enough to stir the edges of his robe. The scholars still come, sometimes with questions, sometimes just to read aloud passages from ancient texts, their voices calm and unhurried in the afternoon warmth. Musa listens, occasionally closing his eyes, occasionally adding a soft hum of agreement. Historians still debate whether Musa's final years were spent focused on spiritual contemplation or continued political involvement. Some suggest he withdrew completely from the intricate management of the empire, turning instead toward faith and quiet reflection. Others believe he remained a steady hand in the background, his influence woven into daily decisions, even if his presence became less visible. You sit with him one evening as he watches a group of children playing with a palm frond ball near the market's edge. Their laughter rings sharp and sweet in the soft air, bouncing against the walls like birdsong. Musa smiles, the kind of small, knowing smile that comes when you realize the world will turn whether you hold it tightly or let it go. One of the palace servants brings him a small dish of roasted chickpeas, still warm from the fire. Musa pops them into his mouth one by one, savoring the simple comfort of salt and crunch, a small pleasure in a life once ruled by the weight of kingdoms. The gold caravans still arrive, but he no longer inspects them personally. His sons handle the tallies, the routes, the delicate balance of gifts and taxes. Musa trusts them now, or perhaps he's simply learned that trust is the lighter choice. You find yourself walking the garden paths with him more than once, the sweet scent of acacia flowers hanging in the air, the gentle hum of bees brushing past your ears. Sometimes he walks in silence. Sometimes he tells stories you've heard before, but the retelling carries new weight when spoken slowly, with long pauses, with glances toward the sky. He speaks of his pilgrimage, not of the gold, not of the grandeur, but of the roads. The slow, rhythmic sound of sandals against sand, the glint of dawn on a sea of camels, the soft murmurs of prayer rising like steam into the morning air. Those are the pieces he holds close now. You notice how his advisors speak more often too. His sons, their glances lingering on the next generation. It's a soft handover, not a dramatic shift. More like easing a basket from one set of hands to another, careful not to tip the balance. Historians still argue whether Musa's transition of power was fully planned or whether it unfolded organically as his energy faded. Some believe he orchestrated every detail of succession with meticulous care. Others suggest his advisors gently nudged the process along, preserving the rhythm of the empire as the seasons turned. One afternoon, you find Musa resting in the shade of a tall baobab tree, the breeze tugging lazily at the edges of his robe. His staff rests across his lap, his fingers slowly tracing the carved patterns along its length. The grain of the wood, polished by years of use stock, you sit with him as he talks about the Niger River, its quiet bends, its shimmering surface at dusk, its gift of fish and fertile shores. He speaks of how the river taught him patience, how it moves, but always finds its way. Sometimes he drifts into stories about his younger days, about markets filled with spices so sharp they made your eyes water, about traders whose camels seemed to carry entire villages on their backs, about the odd satisfaction of weighing gold until your arms ached. You walk with him through the palace gardens again, where pots of mint and tamarind grow, their scents mingling sweet and sharp in the sun. He plucks a leaf, rubs it between his fingers, and smiles softly. His sons manage the caravans now. They handle the traders, the routes, the small disputes over coin and weight. Musa watches, sometimes offering a quiet nod, sometimes offering nothing more than the gentle tap of his staff against the ground. Historians still puzzle over whether the empire's golden era reached its peak in these final years, or if it had already begun its slow, steady descent. Some records suggest the wealth continued to flow long after Musa's passing. Others hint at shifting sands, at rival cities rising, at the delicate balance of power beginning to lean elsewhere. But here, now, the empire feels steady. The markets still fill with the low hum of voices, the soft clink of metal, the warm scent of fresh bread. The scholars still unroll their scrolls. The children still chase their palm frond balls, their laughter sharp and sweet in the air. Musa moves more slowly now, his steps deliberate, his gaze lingering longer on the faces around him, on the curve of a market basket, on the ripples across the river's surface. The gold shines, yes, but you can tell his heart leans more toward the steady rhythm of everyday things, the weight of his staff, the scent of roasting millet, the soft laughter that drifts through the palace walls at dusk. The empire moves forward. The river flows. Musa watches, steady as the stone paths beneath his feet. You find yourself more often at Musa's side in these later days, where the rhythm of life has softened to a quiet hum. The palace is no less grand, but it now feels more like a home than a throne room. The gold-fringed banners still flutter in the breeze, but Musa spends more time under the tamarind trees than beneath the carved wooden ceilings. The courtyards still bustle, but Musa's path now meanders gently through the smaller spaces. The herb gardens, the sun-drenched alcoves, the shaded spots where the scent of mint mingles with the dust. He shares more stories now, the kind that drift like long threads through memory. Tales of his childhood, when he wasn't yet Mansa Musa, but simply Musa, a boy chasing goats through narrow alleys, slipping fish from the riverbank when no one was looking. He tells you about his first camel ride, how he clung to the rough saddle, convinced he'd never walk again when he finally dismounted. There's a certain warmth in his retellings, even in the details that don't glitter, like how the saddle rubbed his legs raw, or how he once dropped a whole basket of pomegranates into the mud and spent an hour trying to scrub them clean. He laughs softly when he remembers, the kind of laugh that pulls at the edges of your own grin. Historians still Debate whether Musa's childhood was spent entirely within the walls of the royal court, or if he roamed more freely among the markets and common streets. Some suggest his early years were closely guarded, preparing him for rule. Others believe he grew up with more freedom, mingling with traders and craftsmen long before he wore a crown. His days now are slow, filled with quiet walks and the simple comfort of soft dates and warm millet. He still speaks with traders from far lands, but more as a curious friend than as a ruler weighing tribute. They bring stories of distant deserts, of ports lined with ships bearing silk and cedar, of languages that Musa rolls on his tongue just to feel their shape. The gold caravans continue their patient routes, camels swaying beneath heavy loads. But Musa's sons handle the accounts now, their voices calm but firm as they settle disputes and mark ledgers. Musa listens sometimes from his shaded bench, nodding when their judgments land true. You notice how the palace has taken on a kind of gentle rhythm, a daily pattern of soft footsteps, low conversations, the clink of pottery being set in place. The children's games still echo off the walls, their palm frond balls bouncing in time with their quick, joyful shouts. Historians still wonder whether Musa's sons continued his exact governance style, or whether they slowly steered the empire in new directions. Some accounts suggest a seamless continuation of his policies. Others hint that subtle shifts began to ripple outward, new priorities quietly replacing the old. Musa shares memories of his pilgrimage, but not the gold, not the spectacle. He speaks of the softness of the morning air outside Cairo, the sound of sandals brushing over cool stone streets, the weight of silence just before the call to prayer. He talks about the scholars he met, the ones who argued over ancient texts while sipping sweet tea, the ones who scribbled so fiercely that ink stained their fingertips for days. You can tell that what he carries most isn't the grandeur, it's the quiet, the small moments. The taste of spiced lentils under a silk awning, the rhythm of prayers rising at dawn, the way his caravan's footsteps left soft trails in the sand that the wind erased by nightfall. But the traders still crossed the Jers. Sahara, their caravans long and patient, their songs lilting over the dunes. The libraries still grow, scrolls copied carefully by candlelight, the scribes' heads bent low in quiet concentration. You walk the garden paths with Musa again, his staff tapping gently against the stones. He pauses often, sometimes to adjust his sandals, sometimes to watch a beetle cross his path, its tiny legs carrying it with determined precision. Musa chuckles softly, saying perhaps the beetle knows more about persistence than all the scholars in his court. Historians still argue whether Musa's emphasis on Islamic scholarship truly transformed Timbuktu into the intellectual beacon it's often remembered as, or whether that reputation blossomed more fully after his time. Some believe his patronage planted the seeds. Others suggest it was his successors who reaped the true golden age of learning. You spend one afternoon sitting in the market shade, watching merchants lay out bolts of indigo cloth and baskets of kola nuts, their voices weaving together like a low song. Musa joins you, his eyes lingering on the texture of the fabrics, the quiet dance of trade unfolding without him needing to steer it. The empire hums along, steady, familiar, its paths well worn by the feet of traders, students, travelers. Musa seems content now to simply walk among them, to watch, to remember, to let the rhythm carry him gently forward. You help him back to the palace as the day cools, the shadows lengthening across the courtyards. The scent of spiced stew drifts on the breeze, mingling with the faint sweetness of fresh dates. Musa taps his staff twice, a quiet punctuation to the end of the walk. He lingers near his sleeping mat, his fingers brushing the embroidered edges of his robe, his gaze steady, soft, perhaps a little distant. He speaks of the Niger River one more time, its patient flow, its gentle curves, Its quiet conversation with the land. The empire will continue. The traders will cross their long roads. The gold will shine. And the river will always know the way. The palace settles into its evening hush, that familiar lull where the warm terracotta walls seem to exhale along with you. The echoes of children's footsteps fade, and the clink of bronze bowls and soft chatter from the kitchens begin to dwindle. You walk slowly, your sandals brushing lightly across the packed earth, following Musa's steady, deliberate pace as he moves toward the quietest corner of the palace. His hands rest easily against his staff, and his breathing is deep, unhurried. He pauses by a low stone bench, the same one he's favored in these later years, where the tamarind trees sway just enough to chase the day's lingering heat. He doesn't speak much now. Sometimes it's just a humming old tune with no words, something he probably learned as a child and never forgot. The tune loops in a way that makes you feel like you've always known it. 2. Historians still argue whether Mansa Musa's final years were marked by quiet reflection, or if he continued to oversee matters of state in full. Some accounts suggest he slowly stepped away from day-to-day governance, his trust placed in the hands of his sons and council. Others believe he remained deeply involved until his very last breath, his mind sharp, his memory precise. Here, in this soft twilight, you see a man whose empire pulses on around him, like the steady current of the Niger, a rhythm that no longer requires his constant hand. Sometimes you catch glimpses of that spark, though the way his eyes flick toward a newly finished library, the way his fingers still trace the ridges of old trade maps, the way he quietly inspects the workmanship of a fresh caravan saddle as if weighing its future miles. You sit with him as the breeze pulls at the edges of your robes, the day cooling quickly now, the courtyard stones finally releasing their held warmth. He speaks of Timbuktu again, but not the grand halls or gold-lined bookshelves. He remembers the scent of parchment, the soft scrape of reeds against papyrus, the flicker of lamplight on the faces of students, the rhythm of the scribes, the patience of the teachers, the quiet hunger for learning. These are the things that seem to linger in his stories. Now, historians still puzzle over whether Musa truly imagined Timbuktu as the great intellectual center it later became, or whether his investments simply happened to grow in that direction. Some say he deliberately built it that way. Others believe it was the natural flowering of the seeds he planted. He speaks of the roads, the long gold-threaded paths of his empire, and the gentle weariness in his voice suggests he's walked each one of them 1,000 times in memory. You follow him to his private prayer space, where the woven mats feel soft and familiar beneath your feet. He lowers himself carefully, his movements practiced, steady, as if each step is a quiet negotiation with time. The walls here are simple, undecorated, save for a small brass lamp that casts a golden glow across the floor. It's not the grand marble halls of Cairo, not the towering mosques built with his caravan's wealth. It's small, humble, the way you might expect from a man who's grown comfortable in his own skin. The empire hums beyond these walls, its gold mines still pulsing, its trade routes still stretching, its scholars still whispering over maps and manuscripts. But in here, it's just Musa, just you, just the soft rustle of linen and the occasional creak of wooden beams. You remember the story Musa once shared about how he thought gold, despite its shine, was a restless companion. He said gold didn't like to stay in one place. It needed to move, to be traded, to pass from hand to hand. Gold didn't like to sit still, but perhaps, he mused, people could. Maybe rest was a kind of wealth. 2. Historians still argue whether Musa's incredible pilgrimage truly destabilized the gold markets of Cairo and Mecca for years, or whether those stories have simply grown more dramatic with each retelling. Some records point to rapid inflation. Others suggest the scale was exaggerated, that Gold's restlessness eventually smoothed itself out. You stay near him as the evening deepens, the breeze pulling at the lamp's flame, casting soft, flickering shadows along the walls. Musa closes his eyes briefly, his breathing slow, measured, as if each exhale is a chapter softly closing. The palace walls seem to lean in closer now, cradling these final, quiet days. You remember the countless traders, the caravans stretching like threads across the desert, the scholars who traveled months just to copy a single page. You remember the tales of his pilgrimage, the streets swept with gold, the sultans who marveled at his generosity, the coins that shimmered long after he passed through. But here, in this small, dim room, you see the softest version of Musa, the man who values the hum of a quiet evening, the smell of fresh bread, the careful turning of a parchment page. His sons now tend to the empire's great ledgers. His scholars now debate beneath the tall walls of Timbuktu's libraries. The caravans still move, the river still flows, the gold still glimmers, and the people still speak his name with quiet reverence. The empire hums on, and Musa, seated in his quiet corner, lets his breath fall into rhythm with it. The stone floors, the woven mats, the low flicker of the lamp, these are his companions now. The empire will remember his gold, his travels, his libraries. But perhaps, more than all of that, it will remember his steady, patient rhythm, the way he shaped his days, the way he lingered in the quiet, the way he let his story unfold like the slow, graceful current of the Niger. And here, in this moment, you rest with him in the calm, unhurried heartbeat of history. Wind dash down the palace is quieted completely now, settling into the kind of stillness that almost hums. The warm stone walls hold the memory of the day's sun, but the air has softened, carrying only the faintest scent of clay and distant bread ovens cooling for the night. You let yourself slow, your breathing easing into the gentle rhythm that seems to wrap the entire empire in its quiet hush. You can almost feel the pulse of the Niger, steady and broad, meandering through the land, as if it too knows there's no need to rush. Your fingers rest against the cool weave of the mat, the familiar texture grounding you, anchoring you to this calm space. The soft crackle of an oil lamp, the rustle of linen as you shift slightly, the distant creak of wooden beams, all of it folds around you like a well-worn blanket. The cat, perhaps a little bolder now in the quiet, tiptoes across the stones, tail flicking softly, settling into her spot as if she's known it all along. There's no hurry to leave this space. The night stretches long and patient, holding you carefully, giving you permission to linger a little longer. You think about the roads Musa traveled, the libraries he built, the gold he gave so freely. But now, none of that asks for your attention. Now, it's simply the stillness that stays with you, the soft, enduring weight of quiet history. You breathe slowly. The house breathes with you. The empire hums on, but here, you're perfectly still. The stone stays. The rest can wait. End of script. Sweet dreams.